But as we segue even deeper into the fall, we were praying about what it was that the Lord wanted to say to us, maybe the next place that he wanted to challenge us in our walk in relationship with him, and just aware. You know, sometimes a part of what happens to the heart of a pastor or preacher is you're just so aware that there are so many things that we face every day that on a lot of levels can feel a bit overwhelming. Just too much. You know what I'm saying? Like, do you ever just feel like that? You're like, come on now, come on, right? Now, sometimes that's personal. Something's happening in your own life or space, and you're like, really? Okay, I hear you people say that. I know you say it too. You're like, really? Really? Okay, it's fine, right? But and even as, man, come on, we're back into another election cycle and season, and ads, help us, Lord Jesus. All the different things, all the stuff that we're just dealing, and it's a lot. And it matters, you know, all these different things that we're facing, looking at that are personal or corporate or community-wide, you know, they matter. They're things we should be concerned about and we should pray about and try to make right decisions in regards to. And then there's just, again, the things that are personal, happen in our lives. Like the things that come around the corner, the fiery trials, as it were, that we all face. It can be a lot. We're starting a new series today, though, called Greater Still. Because however great the challenges we face or whatever is in front of us, come on somebody, God, who he is, and the grace that he gives, are we together on it? Is greater still. And Jacob has always built us an amazing graphic. And even though, Jacob, I see you over there at South, even though Jacob is not someone who loved math as a student, he was reasonably proficient at it. He didn't love it. He's a little bit like his dad. He didn't like it, but he was actually pretty good at it. And he's the one that included a math symbol in the graphic. So I feel obligated today in the launch of this series to talk a little bit about math. Can you believe it? So I have a history and a reputation as being someone who has historically said math is hard, which is true. Math is somewhat hard. But I also am the pastor/preacher who did an entire series called Do the Math. And some of you, if you could see your faces right now, I wish I could look through the camera and see those folks online in the South too, but your faces are like, oh no, the brother's going to talk about math. You look so worried, so concerned. Where are we going? Listen, we're going to keep it simple, everybody. But this whole concept of the greater than and the less than and equal to, those symbols showed up in math really as the development of sort of studies like algebra came into play. And so there was an attempt to write word problems in a way that made more sense. And this showed up around the 1600s. These particular symbols became common in their use. And so you would get problems like X plus Y is, for instance, greater than Z. And so I have a little bit of math for you in this beginning. Let's say, for instance, so this is what we're talking about in this series. Let's say that when X equals trust in God, and Y is God's grace, and Z is all our failures, everybody, then we can safely say that X plus Y is greater, come on somebody, is greater than Z. Are we together on it? Do you understand where I'm going right now? And get it, like, okay, I get it, that our trust in God, and actually it's his great grace, that's such a big deal in that, is always going to be greater, even than our failures. As great as our failures may actually be, no one's diminishing the significance of how bad people like me can mess it up. And everybody's people like me. But hear me when I say greater still. Greater still. Okay, don't you get some give up on you because greater still, okay? This is true. And word problems are interesting too. So I always did kind of like those. That was a little bit like playing some sort of a game to me in math. Because in a word problem, you have dependent variables and you have independent variables. So there are certain variables that could be a part of the equation that don't actually impact the outcome. So a dependent variable, let me give you rather an independent variable. Let's say, for instance, we're talking about your car's ability to accelerate, but you're low on washer fluid, it doesn't matter. Okay, so that variable is an independent variable. The level of washer fluid, believe it or not, everybody, It's good to have. It makes it easier to go fast without running into something. I'll say that. But it does not impact. Washer fluid is not nearly as important to acceleration as gasoline. Gasoline is a dependent variable. You run out of gas, you can't go anywhere. All right, okay, I thought that was good. All righty, let's just get to the preaching part. Add God to any equation and he changes the outcome. Okay, are we good on that one? Did that one make sense to you? Insecurity, a few other examples. Insecurity plus hurtful words can really add up. We know that that's true. Insecurity plus hurtful words that can be big, right? Everyone agree on that? Sometimes, here's what's interesting too, the words weren't even meant to be hurtful. Because insecurity, sometimes it's the insecurity in that equation. Come on, our own insecurity is such a huge quantity that a little bit of what we perceive to be a hurtful word just puts us completely over the top, right? And sometimes the words are actually hurtful, but here's the truth. God's truth about who you are is greater regardless. So regardless of our insecurity and any hurtful words we might have heard, if we will believe in what God says to us about who we are, okay, that's greater still. And God, incidentally, has a big history of changing the outcome of the equation. He's been doing it. We see it all the way through the Word, everybody. There's so many examples. Think about David and Goliath. So there's a good one. I mean, it was 1 against 1, but they weren't the same size. You see what I'm saying? But then God, I always like to joke around here that, come on, Goliath was the underdog. Because the Holy Spirit standing behind David, if Goliath could have seen who he was actually, come on somebody, I said if Goliath could have seen who he was actually facing, he would have said, never mind. My bad. Okay. All right, because we face giants too. But don't forget about God. Sometimes the giant is the thing like what we were talking about in regards to maybe we have a struggle with addiction or we have an unholy habit that we just seem incapable of getting through or past. But God, maybe that's something I'm going to say a lot in this series. But God, or think about another story in the Word. I'm not sure which ones of these we'll get to in the series, but the eyes of Elisha I talked about a few weeks ago in a message here on this stage. But Elisha had been selling out the enemy of Israel, and the king said, man, I got to take this guy out. And so he sent an entire army against this small encampment where the prophet was staying, and the prophet's servant walked out and saw that they were horrifically outnumbered. He said, man, the entire armies of our enemy have surrounded us. What will we do? And Elisha said, well, those that are with us are actually more, than those that are against us. That's some different kind of math right there. And he had to pray for Elisha's servants. He had to pray for his servants' eyes to be open to see it. And there are countless Old Testament battles, etc. One of the greatest is the story of Elijah, the prophet Elijah, who had prophesied according to the word of the Lord that it wouldn't rain until God said so. And he said, till I say, but Elijah was speaking for the Lord. So he was holding back the rain, and it created a scenario where there was a showdown between the prophets of Baal and the prophets of Ashram. And it was actually, Elijah invited them all, which would have been the 450 prophets of Baal, the 400 prophets of Ashram, which would have been 850 to 1. 850 is greater than 1. That's pretty easy math. We should be able to get that one. 850 is greater than 1. Boy, this preacher can preach. Man, I'm telling you, he's helpful. That guy's helping me. I can skip kindergarten. Well, this guy helping us out. But 850 is not greater than 2 when one of the two is God. And 400 didn't even show up. 450 to 1 was still pretty good, though. They felt good about it. But it didn't work out because 450 is not greater than 2 when one of the two is God. Greater still. I don't know what you're walking through, but I know fire is a part of the journey we're on, we're all going to face challenges, difficulties, fiery trials, as it were. The message this morning, I keep mentioning fire and you don't even know why. Why does he keep mentioning that? Well, the title of the message is Greater Than Fire. Because there's another story I'd like to talk about today, and it is a favorite for sure. But I'd like to talk about a time when the odds were stacked against three young men who had been taken into captivity by the evil King Nebuchadnezzar. You might be familiar with it. These three young men, formerly known as Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, had been given the names Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that the way that my granddad used to say it when he preached it. Y'all ready for it? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I love you, Pop. He's been with Jesus for a minute, but he never said Abednego his whole life. He always said Abednego. I don't know. Grandma loved him too much to correct him. I guess. Doesn't matter to me. The truth is, chapter 3 of the book of Daniel tells us a story about these three young men who had been taken into captivity. They were the best of the best. In 605 BC, Nebuchadnezzar pillaged and plundered Jerusalem, and he took many of its best back with him to Babylon, and they were three of those 3,000. And they had been advanced. Chapters 1 and 2 tell incredible stories, and they had been advanced to positions of authority in Babylon. And then chapter 3 tells us the king, after he had a dream that was troubling and Daniel interpreted it, made a horrible decision. And we'll pick up the story here in Daniel chapter 3 and verse 1. King Nebuchadnezzar built a gold statue, 90 feet high and 9 feet thick. He set it up on the Dura plain in the province of Babylon. He then ordered all the important leaders in the province, everybody who was anybody, to the dedication ceremony of the statue. They all came for the dedication, all the important people, and took places before the statue that Nebuchadnezzar had erected. And then check. A herald then proclaimed in a loud voice, "Attention everyone, every race, color, and creed. Listen when you hear the band strike up, all the trumpets and trombones, the tubas and baritones, the drums and cymbals. Fall to your knees and worship the gold statue of the king, that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And anyone who does not kneel and worship shall be thrown immediately into a roaring furnace." Did you see it right there? First of all, come on, man. Everyone. That's what this word says, that he called out to everybody has to bow. That was, and I find it somewhat interesting that the translation here in the Message, there in verse 4 says, "A herald then proclaimed in a loud voice." And I was pondering for my own sake, what are the heralds in the world today that are calling us to bow down? Where's the voice coming from that says everybody's got to do it this way? This is what culture says. This is the call to compromise that we all hear consistently in our world. Now I'm preaching a little bit right now. It's there, man. And everybody hears it. We're all pressured, right, to come into line and be willing to compromise on the convictions we have about who alone is worthy of our worship. And if you choose not to bow, well, we're going to have to throw you in, it's about to go viral, right? Throw you in a fiery furnace. Well, y'all can preach that for yourself. Cultural pressure was immense. Still is. Everybody. Man, and we've been using that since the dawn of time, right? That's been kids' strategies. Well, all the other kids. Was your mama like my mama? If all the other kids jump off a tall building, you're going to jump off a tall building? Maybe. Well, I didn't say that to my mama. I felt a little bit bad right then. Yeeks. I don't know what mama y'all had, but my mama was named Mary, and she was really close to Jesus. Cultural pressure was immense. It still is. But not a good gauge for what was godly or is godly. It still isn't, everybody. I feel like this is a lot of where we've gotten lost. Like, okay, well, there's just been a shift. It's not the right shift. This is still true. This is still our guide. And he is still our God. And we're not meant to bow to any other. any other. That perspective is not going to win you a popularity contest. I can tell you that. Don't worry about it. That's not the contest we're meant to win anyway. Well, and then the band started to play. Well done, band. A huge band equipped with all the musical instruments of Babylon. And everyone, every race, color, and creed. I still think that's powerful. There is some commonality in our lostness, by the way. Fell to their knees and worshiped the gold statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Everybody, though? Everybody? Was it really everybody? Was it really everybody? Everybody except, come on somebody. Everybody except, here's a takeaway for us this morning. Another takeaway. The deliverance of many is often dependent on the faithfulness of a few. See, our choices matter for us. They matter for others too. I mean, come on. People who don't believe in God or aren't following him, okay, all right. But come on to church, everybody. We're meant, called, and empowered to be faithful. And these three guys, man, Daniel 3:12 says, let me back up and say, so then there were the astrologers and the others who sort of set up this big event for compromise who were frustrated. This is where the lack of popularity for the choice of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, got them sold out. So they were telling her, look at these guys, though. They hate you, O king. They started with, long live the king. We love the king. These guys don't, though. These guys you put in a position of power, they don't love you, which wasn't true, by the way. This wasn't a lack of love for Nebuchadnezzar. Come on, everybody. We live in a world where disagreement is perceived as hate. You either agree with me or you hate me. Not true. Not true. In fact, come on, let's prove it's right? Let's prove that we can stand firm on our convictions and love more impactfully than anyone else in the world. Are you with me, church family? Let's just love people so well that argument doesn't hold any value or weight. Let's just love people real well. They were being accused of something that wasn't true. They didn't have a beef with Nebuchadnezzar. They just weren't going to bow to that statue. That was their beef. Right? So these guys sold him out. And verse 12 says, they went then to Nebuchadnezzar and they said, there are some Jews here, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who you placed in high positions in the province of Babylon, jealousy. And these men are ignoring you, O king. They don't respect your gods, and they won't worship the gold statue you set up. And Nebuchadnezzar was livid. Here's what Jesus said to us. Here was our call and command. Jesus said to love everybody. But he never said everybody's going to love you back. Just a little heads up. Just give you a little quick piece of information there. It might be pertinent as we push forward here. This, another takeaway for us, is not the first time in history that faithfulness to God and allegiance to his word has been frowned upon. And what I mean about that is this time in history, not that time in history, but this time in history. This time in history, the one we live in right now, is not the first time in history that faithfulness to God and allegiance to his word has been frowned upon. Historically, it hasn't been a popular choice. Verse 13 tells us, furious King Nebuchadnezzar ordered Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to be brought in. And when the men were brought in, Nebuchadnezzar asked, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you don't respect my gods and refuse to worship the gold statue that I have set up? I'm giving you a second chance. But from now on, when the big band strikes up, you must go to your knees and worship the statue I have made. If you don't worship it, you will be pitched into a roaring furnace, no questions asked. And then this is the part where he overplayed his hand. I don't know about you, but when I read this, I'm like, well, you shouldn't have said that. That's where I go with this. And then he had the audacity to say, who is the God who can rescue from my power then? I get goosebumps every time I read that, right? I think that, here's the heavenly scene. So there's Jesus is sitting up here, and then he said that. Okay, they were always going to come to the rescue, but then he said that. Who is the God that will rescue you from my power then? Okay. And here's Jesus sitting next to the Father, and he's like, I think he scooted up on his chair. That's what I think. Okay, I don't know. I wasn't there, but I think he's, what? Nope. I don't want us to send Michael, the archangel. Gabriel does not get the call on this one, sorry. This is me. Come on, anybody that's ever been going through a hellaciously hard time, come on, somebody. Anybody who's ever made a mistake that was so significant that when the enemy told you couldn't recover from it, you were tempted to believe him, but then he went too far. Even God won't love you now. And here comes Jesus. Oh, no, he didn't. No, he did not. He did not just tell somebody there's no hope when I'm still God and I'm still good and I'm still on. No, he didn't. About to show you who's greater. The devil's always been overplaying his hand. He's well educated, pretty significant, but he should not play cards. At least not against Jesus. Didn't expect to say that today. Verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego then answered King Nebuchadnezzar, your threat means nothing to us. Whew. If you throw us in the fire, the God we serve can rescue us from your roaring furnace and anything else you might cook up, O king. But even if he doesn't, that's so punchy. Even if he doesn't. Come on, somebody say even if. Even if it doesn't work out the way that I wish it would, even if it doesn't turn around on this side of eternity, even if he's still God and he's still good and we won't bow. Even if he doesn't, it wouldn't make a bit of difference, O king. We still wouldn't serve your gods or worship the gold statue you set up. I believe this. Conviction was a part of the equation the enemy didn't count on. He didn't count on that. He didn't count on it. He was using fear. Whew. He's done made a threat. He's going to heat it up 7 times hotter, and they're going to be like, okay, and their friends are going to come around and say, you did great. I mean, you stood when everybody else bowed, but obviously at this point, you have to admit, you have to take that back or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like no. Conviction was a part of the equation the enemy didn't count on. Conviction without action is still less than the challenges that we face to our faithfulness. I mean, convictions are good, but you got to take some action. But conviction plus trust is greater than. Come on, that's an equation I should have put on the screen. Conviction plus trust is greater than any obstacle to our faithfulness. I've been reading Gabriel's book, Brilliant Faith. In chapter 13, he has this amazing graphic that he used to describe what it looked like for someone to be trustworthy. What we see here in this story is that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were trustworthy. What made them trustworthy was their choice to trust. It was their choice to trust. Trustworthiness isn't in that we just do what we do until we reach an impasse and we're like, okay, well, I can't do that. They trusted God. It was their trust in God that caused them to be trustworthy. Like, I'm going to trust him, and because I trust him, then I'll be counted amongst those that were trustworthy. The quote from Gabriel's book is, our consistent trust proves us trustworthy. It's true. These guys were like, okay, yes. But why? When all their friends, because we trust God. Because at the end of it, we trust God. Verse 19, Nebuchadnezzar, his face was purple with anger. Yeah, he's mad. We just go ahead, hold your breath. It's fine with me. Cut off Shadrach, Meshach, and he didn't want to hear him anymore. Cut off Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered the furnace fired up 7 times hotter. than usual, he ordered some strong men from the army to tie them up, hands and feet, and throw them into the fiery furnace, or roaring furnace. Did you see what he did there? Right there, like heated up 7 times hotter. Has that ever seemed weird to anybody but me? Like even on the flannel board when I was a kid, I was like, what's that about? He was stacking the equation. That's what he was trying to stack the equation. Like he was like, okay, well, their God, I mean, I've been pretty impressed with him so far, but let's just stack the equation. 7 times hotter. 7 times hotter, plus some really strong men, bind them hand and foot. What are they going to do? You're throwing them in a fire. Inside of a furnace. Did they really need to be bound? He's stacking the equation. It ain't going to work, incidentally, because 850 is not greater than 2 when one of the 2 is God. You with me so far? Okay. Welcome to our world too, by the way, in regards to stacking the equation. That's all I have to say about that. Verse 21, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, bound hand and foot, fully dressed from head to toe, were pitched into the roaring fire. Because the king was in such a hurry and the furnace was so hot, flames from the furnace actually killed the men who carried Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who actually didn't get thrown in the fire. These guys that threw them in, and they weren't bound, but they still died. That's how hot the fire was. Just saying. We'll pull a preach point out of that some other time. Meanwhile, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, as they were thrown into it, the fire raged around them. Here's another takeaway for us. Fire is an indiscriminate agent of destruction that always garners the attention of God. I say that because if you're going through fire, you just need to know that. God knows and notices when you're going through a fire, a fiery trial, as it were, or a difficulty or a challenge. And that always garners God's attention. He's really good at seeing fire. I feel like sometimes we think God don't know. I brought that up a lot this year. I feel like sometimes we think God doesn't know. I'll tell you somebody else that has a real ability to smell even just smoke, and that's Karen, my wife. In fact, she is an amazing human who has the ability to focus like no one else I know. So whatever she's doing, we call her one track, but I mean, she's on it. And there are code words we use when we need her attention. One of them is roach, but that has nothing to do with fire. That will work. The other one is smoke. You smell smoke? She come from a dead sleep to wide awake. That's a true story. I'm telling you, I can be going through the smallest thing. Not even a significant trial, and I know Jesus knows and notices. He's like, I'm over here with you, though. He's so good at noticing. Suddenly, in verse 24, King Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in alarm. So they throw him in, and then suddenly the word says King Nebuchadnezzar jumped up. So he's looking. He's looking down the fiery furnace. This is the part where I usually tell a Scooby joke, but it's like Nebuchadnezzar is looking down in there, and he's like, hey, wait a minute. Didn't we, you see it there, throw 3 men bound hand and foot into the fire? So he's up there, he's going, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. He's 1, 2, 3, 4? 4? Didn't we throw 3 men bound hand and foot into the fire? That's right, O king, they said. But look, he said, I see 4 men. Come on, somebody, walking around freely in the fire, completely unharmed. And the 4th man looks like the Son of a God. I like the King James on that one. It literally says, the 4th one, his face is like the Son of God. How did he know? He'd never seen Jesus. You said it. You said, well, God is going to deliver you from my power. That would be me. The one standing in this fire with these 3 dudes. That's who. I think when you see Jesus, you know it's him. That's what I think. I hope. Okay, so let's do a little math. We'll land with this. Let's just do a little more math. Everybody, stay with me. You're going to be fine. Let's just do a little more math. So there was 3 men in a fire, bound and burning. That's how it is. If it's three men in a fire equals bound and burning, like tied and toasted. 4 men in a fire, though. Four men in a fire, when one is Jesus, equals free and walking around. When X is any number of people, and Y is Jesus, and Z is fire, then X plus Y is greater than Z. You see what I'm saying? Now, X is any number of people. It could be 1, it could be 1 million, it could be 2 million, it could be 20 million, it could be 7 billion. Everybody. But it takes Jesus. To change the outcome of the equation. Verse 26. Nebuchadnezzar went to the door of the roaring furnace and called in, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the high God, come out here. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walked out of the fire. Well, there it is. There it is in our big takeaway for the week. The one that we'll primarily unpack in life group is this. If fire is what you have to walk through to stay in God's will, you can know He'll be there with you when you do. I wonder about the other people. I mean, a lot of the folk that bowed certainly were Babylonians. They didn't have a history with God, but there was 3,000 people. Now, Daniel was actually not there, so we know that some of them weren't there in the Dura plain during this event because they had other assignments. But what about the ones that did bow? Think about what they missed out on seeing. Anybody need a miracle? Stay faithful in the fire. You got to stay faithful in the fire if you want to see that miracle. If you want to see that miraculous provision, you want to see God come through, you got to stay faithful in the fire. God will love you if you bow, but you'll miss Him if you do. Oof. He'll still love you if you bow, but you'll miss Him if you do. You've walked through some fire, maybe. Some of us, some of you. Maybe you still are. I remember the first time I ever saw Tex. We were pre-launch of 828, and there was a church that we used to visit. We would go to that church. It was the Sunday after Tex's wife Ruthie's homegoing celebration. 48 years married. It would be 48 this year. But I remember we were sitting in the balcony and your entire family walked to the front of the church. And I knew, because I knew and know Tex's daughter, and I knew what had happened. Didn't know him, had never met him, but I watched him walk, and I watched him walk, and I said, there's a man walking through fire. But he wasn't walking alone. And it wasn't even just that his kids were with him. I watched him walk, and I said, he's not walking alone. I remember the lump. And I watched not only that day just to see Tex walk through the fire, but I watched Tex walk out of the fire. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Been there? You been there? Y'all got stories to tell? I have stories to tell. Karen and I once prayed that exact prayer. When our son Isaac was born 3 months early, weighed 1 pound and 12 ounces. We're in a hospital hallway. She's on a gurney. They whisked him away to a neonatal intensive care unit in a helicopter. And the last thing the doctor said was, I give him a 20% chance of making it through the night. And we were just a couple of kids. And we looked at each other. And we gripped hard. And we said, Lord, please heal him. Here, if you would. But even if you don't. We prayed this. That's how grace works, everybody. Even if you don't, you're still God. And we're going to trust you. Bob Bittner's walked out of the fire. I see someone who knows the faithfulness of God. Those testimonies are in this house. They're in that house there at South. Come on. You know what I'm saying is so. And maybe you're going through something difficult even today. Isaiah 43, 2-3 was written about 100 years before this event took place. And it isn't that unlikely that Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah would have known the words of the prophet, which say, when you pass through the waters, I'll be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. Come on, somebody, real quick, feel this with me. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. That's what I'm talking about. Greater than. No matter how great the challenge we face when following God's will, He is greater still. Therefore, Daniel chapter 3, verse 29, I issue this decree, the words of Nebuchadnezzar, anyone, anywhere, of any race, color, or creed, who says anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego will be ripped to pieces, limb from limb, and their houses torn down. A little over the top, and quite a shift. There has never been a God who can pull off a rescue like this. Then the king promoted once again Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. And I'll finish with the poem. Fickle is the friendship we have with fire. 1 minute you're warmed, the next minute you're burned. Fires for cooking and heating are good as long as respect is the skill that you've learned. But the fiery trial of the spiritual sword is the kind of fire we'd like to avoid. We've all seen the damage such fires can cause, the destinies lost, and the lives they've destroyed. But avoiding such fires isn't really an option. Jesus said trouble is part of this life. And if that's not enough, just live with conviction. That in itself may cause a flame to ignite. Sure, some of the fires are reasonably small, not so hard to endure or even put out. Then others show up like an inferno, unbearably big, overwhelmingly stout. But no matter how great the fire we face, Jesus is greater. His grace is more. When He's walking with us, even 7 times hotter is just the right level to refine and restore. Lord Jesus, I pray today that whatever we're walking through, we walk through with You, and that, Lord, it isn't wasted. But God, even in the fire, that You would work in us and that You would work through us and refine us, restore us, and cause the lives of conviction that we live to be about a passion we have for You, not talking points or perspectives that are simply earthly objectives, but eternally significant, predetermined by You. Let us lean into who You are and face every struggle with grace and believe in every season for a miracle.